In America's long and complicated history with immigration, few moments have sparked as much controversy as the Supreme Court's recent decision backing President Donald Trump. In a move that ignited fierce debate across the political spectrum, the court allowed the administration to continue what critics describe as roving ICE patrols in Southern California. These patrols, conducted by masked and heavily armed immigration agents, have been accused of targeting Latinos indiscriminately, sometimes even U.S. citizens, for questioning and detention. Supporters of the ruling argue it is a victory for law and order, giving immigration enforcement the tools it needs to remove dangerous criminals. Critics see it as a dangerous step toward racial profiling, constitutional erosion, and authoritarian policing. The decision highlights not just a legal battle, but the clash between two visions of America, one of border security at any cost, and one of civil liberties even amid security challenges. This is the story of how the Supreme Court gave Trump a win on immigration, why it matters beyond California, and what it means for the future of constitutional freedoms in the United States. Chapter 1. The case that sparked the debate. At the center of this case were incidents across 7 counties in Southern California. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE agents, often masked and heavily armed, stopped individuals they believed might be undocumented. Many of those stopped identified as Latino, and in some cases they were U.S. citizens. The legal question boiled down to one issue: did ICE have reasonable suspicion for these stops, as required by the Fourth Amendment? Lower courts, first a district court, then the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, concluded that ICE had not met this standard. Judges ruled that relying on ethnicity, language, or presence in certain locations like farms or bus stops was insufficient to justify detentions. In July, a U.S. District Court ordered DHS to discontinue these practices if they were based primarily on such factors. For immigrant rights groups, it was a victory for constitutional protections. But the Trump administration appealed, arguing that limiting ICE would cripple its ability to enforce immigration laws effectively. The Supreme Court's decision to side with Trump marked a stunning reversal, effectively greenlighting the controversial practice and signaling a broader willingness to grant the executive branch wide leeway on immigration enforcement. Chapter 2. Trump's Immigration Crackdown. The ruling did not happen in isolation. It came amid a sweeping immigration crackdown under Trump's second term. From expanded border wall projects to mass deportation operations in cities like Chicago and Boston, Trump has consistently framed immigration as a matter of national security. For his administration, the roving patrols fit neatly into this narrative. Officials argued that agents needed flexibility to stop suspected undocumented immigrants wherever they might be, whether at car washes, bus stops, or farms. Tricia McLaughlin, a DHS spokesperson, celebrated the decision, declaring it a win for the safety of Californians and the rule of law. This framing cast ICE not as an agency engaged in profiling, but as frontline defenders against murderers, rapists, gang members, and other criminal illegal aliens. It was a classic Trump strategy, painting opposition not as a matter of constitutional rights, but as opposition to public safety itself. The timing also mattered. With political debates over crime and immigration intensifying, Trump could use the Supreme Court victory as proof that his administration's hardline approach was not only working, but also constitutionally valid. Chapter 3. Justice Kavanaugh's Concurrence. Although the court issued its decision without a full explanation, Justice Brett Kavanaugh filed a concurrence that shed light on the conservative majority's reasoning. Kavanaugh acknowledged that ethnicity alone could not justify suspicion, but he argued it could still be a relevant factor when combined with other circumstances. For example, being in a high-traffic area for undocumented labor, speaking a certain language, or appearing to fit a profile could, in combination, provide reasonable suspicion. Importantly, Kavanaugh emphasized that reasonable suspicion does not equal guilt. Instead, it permits immigration officers to briefly stop someone and inquire about their status. To him, this was a balanced approach, protecting national security while still respecting legal standards. But critics saw it differently. They warned that Kavanaugh's framework gave ICE a broad mandate to continue practices that, in reality, amounted to racial profiling. By legitimizing these stops, the court had blurred the line between legitimate suspicion and discriminatory policing. Chapter 4: Sotomayor's Fiery Dissent. If Kavanaugh's concurrence offered justification, Justice Sonia Sotomayor's dissent provided the counterpoint, and it was scathing. Sotomayor, the court's first Hispanic justice, warned that the ruling created a papers, please environment where anyone who looked Latino could be seized, questioned, and detained. She accused the majority of ignoring the on-the-ground reality of ICE's actions, which often involved firearms, physical violence, and detentions far more severe than simple inquiries. We should not have to live in a country where the government can seize anyone who looks Latino, speaks Spanish, and appears to work a low-wage job, she wrote. Rather than stand idly by while our constitutional freedoms are lost, I dissent. Her dissent underscored a broader critique of the court's handling of Trump-era cases, the increasing use of unexplained emergency orders, with little transparency about the reasoning behind major decisions. To Sotomayor, the court was not just wrong, it was undermining its own credibility by failing to provide full explanations. Chapter 5: The Emergency Appeal Trend. The roving patrols case was just one of nearly 24 emergency appeals Trump's administration had filed to the Supreme Court since his second term began. Many involved immigration, and in several cases the court sided with Trump. Critics argue that the court's willingness to issue quick, unexplained orders has reshaped American law without the deliberation and transparency that major constitutional questions deserve. Justice Elena Kagan herself has publicly expressed concern, noting that emergency rulings often bypass the normal process of briefing, argument, and written opinions. For Trump, however, the strategy worked. By filing emergency appeals, his administration could short-circuit the traditional judicial process and secure quick victories. Each one added to his ability to reshape immigration enforcement in ways that would otherwise have faced years of legal challenges. Chapter 6: DHS Defiance and Enforcement Culture. Even before the court's ruling, Trump administration officials had signaled they would continue the patrols regardless of lower court rulings. Justice Sotomayor highlighted this in her dissent, citing statements from DHS leaders who mocked the courts and vowed to go even harder now. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem reportedly called a district judge an idiot for ruling against the patrols. ICE and CBP officials boasted on social media about chasing, cuffing, and deporting migrants at car washes. The culture was clear. The administration saw judicial oversight not as a constraint, but as an obstacle to bulldoze. This defiance matters because it raises questions about the separation of powers. If executive agencies ignore or dismiss lower court rulings and then receive backing from the Supreme Court, the balance of checks and balances tilts dramatically toward the presidency. For many observers, this was less about immigration and more about the health of American democracy. Chapter 7: Civil Liberties at Risk. For immigrant rights advocates and civil liberties groups, the Supreme Court's decision was chilling. The American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, which represented some of the plaintiffs, condemned the ruling as a green light for racial profiling. Today's order puts people at grave risk, allowing federal agents to target individuals because of their race, how they speak, or the jobs they work, said Cecilia Wang, the ACLU's legal director. For anyone perceived as Latino, she warned, the ruling meant living under constant threat of detention. The deeper issue, critics argued, was the erosion of the Fourth Amendment. The Constitution requires reasonable suspicion for stops. But when suspicion is based on ethnicity, language, or presence in a particular location, the line between lawful enforcement and unconstitutional discrimination blurs dangerously. This was not just about immigrants. U.S. citizens of Latino descent also faced heightened risks of wrongful detention, harassment, and fear. Chapter 8. Public Perception and Political Impact. The ruling landed in a country already deeply divided over immigration. For Trump's supporters, it was validation of his law and order stance. For opponents, it was proof of creeping authoritarianism. Polls show Americans split sharply along partisan lines. Conservatives tend to view immigration enforcement as essential to national security, while liberals emphasize civil rights and due process. Independents are torn, often depending on how the issue is framed, as a fight against crime or as a question of racial fairness. For Trump, the political calculus was straightforward. Hardline immigration policies energized his base. Every legal victory could be framed as proof that he was delivering on his promises, even in the face of liberal resistance. The court's decision became both a policy win and a political weapon. Chapter 9. Historical Parallels. Trump's use of roving patrols has echoes in American history. During the mid-20th century, immigration enforcement frequently relied on sweeps and raids targeting Mexican-American communities, often under programs like Operation Wetback. These policies were criticized for racial profiling, but defended at the time as necessary for border control. Civil liberties challenges have also arisen in other contexts, from stop-and-frisk policies in New York City to Japanese-American internment during the World War II. Each case raised the same fundamental question: how far can the government go in restricting liberties in the name of security? The Supreme Court's decision in Trump's favor fits into this larger historical pattern. Future historians may look back on it as another moment when America struggled and failed to balance freedom and security. Chapter 10. The Future of Immigration Enforcement. What happens next? With the court's backing, ICE is likely to expand roving patrols beyond California. Other states could see similar operations, particularly in areas with large immigrant populations. For immigrants and Latinos, the ruling means more uncertainty and fear. For civil rights groups, it signals years of continued legal battles. And for Congress, it raises urgent questions about whether legislative action is needed to set clearer limits on enforcement authority. Ultimately, the decision underscores how much power the Supreme Court holds in shaping American life. With a conservative majority, Trump's immigration agenda has found judicial support. But whether this strengthens national security or undermines constitutional freedoms will be debated for years to come. The Supreme Court's decision to allow Trump's roving ICE patrols in California is more than a legal ruling. It is a test of America's constitutional values, a flashpoint in the immigration debate, and a warning about the growing power of the executive branch. Supporters say it makes America safer. Critics argue it makes America less free. Both cannot be true. The choice between security and liberty is now at the heart of the nation's future. So, what do you think? Should immigration enforcement have the power to stop people based partly on how they look or speak, or should constitutional protections always come first? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dive documentaries into the battles shaping our democracy.